was multitasking here. All right, I'm going to turn myself off and I'm going to turn it over to our experts. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This is going to be an overview of the benefits of studying in the UK. I'm just going to introduce myself to start. My name is Peter Carlisle. I am the Senior International Officer for the University of Glasgow, based in New York City. And I'm just going to pass the baton to my other two colleagues here.
Hi guys, thank you very much for hosting us, Catherine. Really great to be here. Really appreciate it. Sorry, but I was very close to time. I had a few Wi-Fi connection issues at my institution, which is not a reflection of our institution at all, I can assure you. My name is Ian Harris. I represent Northumbria University, located in northeast England in the city of Newcastle upon Tyne. It's great for you to join us. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
And hello, I'm Will Abraham. I'm the regional manager for North America at Goldsmiths University of London. I'm based in New York along with Peter. And yeah, we're really delighted to present to you today on this summer day.
So this is the big question. Why study in the United Kingdom? And we're going to go over a few reasons why UK is a great choice. And there are many points we could make. First off, I think one approach to determining whether the UK is the right fit for you is the curriculum, looking at that, right? In the UK, it's much more common to specialize in your degree early on. You apply directly to a degree and you start studying that degree from year one. So for many students, that could be ideal because you get to focus on what you're interested in rather from the get-go. Our degrees are recognized globally. You can go anywhere in the world with our degrees. You can also come back to the United States and employers will recognize the university. And then of course, there's that gaining some international experience. Studying in the UK for 3 or 4 years really provides that international experience that you might not get from a semester or a year studying abroad through a US university. We're also quite affordable. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation, give you a range, cost of living estimates, but by and large, more affordable. Also, we are a gateway. The UK is an island, but the English Channel is the only barrier that separates us from Europe, and there are lots of ways to get to Europe, whether that's train, flight, or even a ferry, and all very, very close. So there's just a lot to explore. Northern Africa is close as well. And then I think that the structure of the UK university experience is one that facilitates a great deal of independence, lots of social opportunities and academic opportunities to really expand your horizons. So where to study? When you look at the US and you're determining what universities could be of interest to you, right? You're looking at city, location. You're looking at transportation links. You're looking at course of study. So the same can be said about the UK. UK is a smaller nation, but also very, very diverse. And you could study in larger cities like London, smaller cities, like Newcastle, or smaller towns like Bath. And there's just a really wide range. Local transport is really, really excellent. Actually, in Scotland, if you're a student, you can take the bus for free anywhere in Scotland. That's a nice little perk as well. But then also, we are a country with a number of nations, right? So we have England, we have Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, and each nation has their own distinct, culture, but also overall environment to explore. So that's just a few things to consider when you're looking at different universities in the UK. I really recommend going to UCAS to explore further, as well as the university's website. As I mentioned before, we are, the United Kingdom is a country of nations, and each nation, they have their own approach to academics. And England, Wales, and Northern Ireland both share 3-year degrees. So undergraduate degrees are 3 years. They're subject focused from the get-go. There are opportunities to graduate in 4 years, which I'll talk about in a little bit. This is in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. In Scotland, we're typically always a 4-year degree, similar to US universities. And the reason for that, and I'll explain a little bit further down the line, is that we offer a little bit more flexibility and less focus in the first 2 years. So is a 3-year degree right for you? This is another consideration, right? So if you do enroll at a university in England, Northern Ireland, or Wales, you could graduate in 3 years, as I said, but also you could end up graduating in 4 years. And that's if your degree encourages a work placement opportunity in year 3, or even requires. You also might want to study abroad in year 3, and that's an optional. That's optional, of course, and sometimes is dependent on your GPA, but that would add an extra year to your degree. So you could graduate in 4 years. There also are integrated master's options as well. So it would be a 3+1, and that would allow you to graduate in 4 years as well. So these are, more options to look into. It's really important that when you're researching different degrees, you look at the summaries that are available on university websites to see all the details of what is offered through that degree program. Now, in Scotland, it's a little bit different. As I said, we offer a 4-year university duration, but in the first 2 years, there's a bit of flexibility. So if I decided to apply and enroll as a physics student at a Scottish university, I would be taking physics that first year, but I also could take classes in other subjects. And so this example shows that the student is taking classes in chemistry and astronomy because these are other interests of the student. At that point, if the student would like, they could change their degree as well. So if they wanted to change from physics to chemistry, that would be possible after their first year. Now, second year allows for further exploration as well. You are able to take, at least one subject outside of your degree program, and then ultimately you graduate in 4 years, specializing in your degree program in years 3 and 4. So I'm going to hand this off now to my colleague, Ian.
Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate that, and a really good insight and some keywords that I'll just explore in a little bit more detail were alluded to by Peter in his introduction, which is great. Please do, if someone can take responsibility if there are any problems with the connection in terms of your ability to hear or see me, just raise a hand, and it might be that one of my colleagues will have to step in. But I'm just going to touch on affordability and finances, and a little bit on student life as well. So I think the key word there is affordability, because it's about comparative affordability. And I think you'll all be aware of the narrative around increasing costs for higher education in the US, certainly. And it's about comparing what's available to you, what your access is to in terms of the type of funding available, any scholarships provision, but also getting a real sense of flavour for costs and how they are based and how they compare from US in terms of private, public, in-state and out-of-state. The key thing to recognise in the UK is where we are different is the vast majority of our higher education provision is public autonomous institutions. And so there's not really necessarily a private sector, and that means that institutions, although they do have flexibility with their tuition fee costs, they are relatively favourable in terms of comparison to some of the large out-of-state or private institutions and colleges that you'll find in the US. And the next slide will go over that in a little bit more detail. But just to pick up on a few of the points that we mentioned in this, and certainly some food for thought and opportunities for you to explore in more detail as you are spending that time now doing your research. So institutions will offer the ability to use federal loans, and certainly our free institutions will offer that as well. In terms of scholarships, there will be nuances in terms of the scholarships that are available at institutions, whether it's at specific subjects, specific degrees, or it's at specific institutions. There may be application processes relating to those scholarships. There may be deadlines as well. So it's just about, again, just checking in, doing your research, looking at the information that's available on site, talking to colleagues, your academic advisors, your counsellors, and also us guys at the institutions, just to get a sense, because they can change year on year as well. And it's always good just to make sure you're ahead of what's available at the institutions and you're not missing out on any of the funding that might be available. It's unlikely that you're going to get any of the full rides, that you may find in US colleges. There may be athletic scholarships as well. It's something to consider. Some UK universities have very strong sporting profiles, and I'll touch on that when we go into the student life side. And it may be that there's some eligibility for elite athletes for small funding. Students who come over on a student visa to study in the UK are actually eligible to work up to 20 hours during term time. And there's some really good in terms of opportunities, both in terms of a work experience and just building your resume, but also funding your studies whilst you're over here. You will, of course, have to provide evidence that you can fund your studies whilst you're in the UK, and that will be all part of the process and explained to you as you look to make your application. There are going to be opportunities for instalment plans for tuition and accommodation as well. And I think we're all very much aware of the cost of living crisis that we often hear referred to both in the US but also in the UK. And universities have a lot of systems, policies and support networks in place to help students who may be struggling financially. And certainly students will have the opportunity to access that if they need to. There will be a healthcare surcharge that students would need to pay in advance of attending the UK as a student, but that will give them access to our National Health Service. And we talk about that in the next slide. So just a few examples for comparison. I think this is a really helpful when you just see it down in the kind of raw numbers in terms of comparative costs for attendance. Obviously, the big thing that Peter touched on as well is the duration of study. And I always say this to students when they're considering studying in the UK, is the idea that you will potentially be graduating a year or maybe 2-3 years sooner than you might be in the US. So what that means is that you will be out in the workplace, hopefully, earning money before some of your friends who have stayed in the US. So not only are we looking here at the relative cost comparisons in terms of savings for tuition fee and living costs, but also that opportunity for you to graduate from college, from university, sooner than you may have done in the US and go either straight into professional qualifications, employment, or other routes to earn money quicker, which is always a great feeling when you've graduated, you've got that degree, and you're out in the workplace earning that money. So this will cover tuition fees, and it will also cover living fees, and that can vary depending on location. Typically, we compare inside London and outside of London as the two main comparisons for the cost of living, and that does vary from city to city. So it's just something to worthwhile when you're looking at allocating funding for your study and budgeting, which we offer lots of support for prospective students and students whilst they're at the university as well. In terms of the student lifestyle, I think it's always interesting to touch on this because everyone who's attending this session, everyone that we always speak to has very different perceptions about what it's going to be like to study overseas. The first thing I always say to students is that you are going to be coming, even though you are coming from overseas, and you're joining a brand new experience to many of you. That's not just limited to being an overseas student, to being an international student, to coming from another country. There'll be lots of people who obviously are joining university for the first time and may not have actually had the opportunity to visit that university, that campus, that city. Everyone will be going through that same journey together. So there's a real collective feeling, and there's lots of support, as I've alluded to already, in terms of the induction process, in terms of settling into student life, in terms of getting used to your academic side as well as your pastoral and student life side. Sports are similar to intramural, and students can also play competitively depending on the sport and university. And you can play at a really high level. Certainly from my experience, I played football, or soccer as I dare call it, for you guys. And I represented my university and travelled all over the UK and played at a reasonably high level as well. And there are certainly variations in terms of how US college and UK college sports is played and recruited to. Clubs and societies are available to all students, and again, that induction week offers students an opportunity to go and see what's out there. Lots of clubs and societies will be pitching for new students to come and join them, and it's very subsidised in terms of cost. Small membership fees, and then the activities themselves are heavily subsidised as well, and they cover a wide range of societies and clubs, as it says there. Students' Union is really the heart of the university campus in terms of student life and the buzz that you'll get. It's very much led by students for students, and that's a great supportive network that offers advocacy for students, as well as supporting students through the opportunities to explore societies. And we all have very, very well ingrained, well trained and robust mental health, well-being, financial support and services, all of which is a provision that students have free access to within the university. And I always encourage students to make any needs known, either in advance of applying or actually whilst they get here, just to make sure that provision is there, that we can support all students as we wish to. I often get asked about bringing support animals to campus. And that's something that, unfortunately, universities, I don't know about my colleagues, but certainly in Northumbria, we can't support animals on campus through the accommodation provision that we have. But that's a question that we often get asked, but there's any other wealth of health and support services available, as well as what you would typically find in terms of career service for sourcing internships, whether Peter's alluded to that during your actual degree, or whether outside your degree and beyond your study as well. And that careers advice isn't limited to students whilst they're here, but it's also for students after graduating. We want to keep in touch, we want to support you, and that is available to you as well. And as well, the immigration and visa support that will be available to all students pre and during their study. Accommodation is obviously a key feature of students' experience on campus. It's highly normal to have a single study bedroom, single occupancy, your own space. As you'll see in the pictures there, typically you'll have your own bedroom and setup. Some of them may be en suite, and those facilities vary depending on price, but also location. And most universities, not all, will guarantee accommodation for international students, and that'll be university managed accommodation in the most part, either on or close to the campus. Certainly we can all speak for our own accommodation provision. Accommodation costs vary, obviously considerably, depending on the amenities that are important to you. And I think it's just about what you are most comfortable with, what you feel confident with. If it's a case of you feel confident that you can cook it for yourself and you're happy to have shared communal spaces, shared kitchen, shared bathroom facilities, or actually you would prefer en-suite, maybe some catered provision where you'll get your morning, your lunch or evening meal cooked for you. It really does depend on what's suitable for you and what your preferences are, but certainly there's a wealth of options at all institutions, and all needs will be catered for. And I think I'll be now passing over to Will.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Sorry to throw Northumbria under the bus, but we actually do allow service animals in some of our halls at Goldsmith, in case anyone has them. So now I'm just going to do a little dive into UCAS shortly. Hopefully some of you have heard of UCAS, but if not, I'm here to just briefly touch on what the application system is for applying to the UK, and just kind of maybe demystify the process for you a little bit. So UCAS is a aggregate application, just like the Common App, and every single university in the UK is part of UCAS. So it's a really easy way to make and track your application. And you can use UCAS for a variety of things, not just for applying to university. You can research courses there. As Peter touched on earlier, you can even do pretty granular searches of what you're looking for. So if you want a more suburban style campus and you're looking to study business in Wales, you can actually filter results pretty narrowly. So you can also read blogs from international students, look at where there might be virtual open days or in-person open days if you're going to the UK to go visit universities. There's also really good resources for how to write your personal statement and a bunch of other things that you can check out on ucas.com. But for the application in general, you have a maximum of 5 choices when you are applying to university. So unlike in the US where there's nearly unlimited amounts of options, and the Common App is what, like 20 some universities at the limit, we have a limit of 5 choices. So what I mean by choices is these are programs at universities. So if you recall, when Peter was telling you about the specialization of degrees, that also goes to the application. So keep in mind, you're not applying to the university as a whole, you're typically applying to a particular program or department at the university. So programs should be similar. So you should be applying to 5 business-oriented courses or 5 natural science-oriented courses. Your application is very focused on your degree of study. So it doesn't really help you or really make sense if you're applying to 2 biology courses, 2 music courses, and a philosophy course. It just really wouldn't work for your personal statement, which I'll touch on in a minute. If anyone's looking into medicine, veterinary science, medicine, or dentistry, those are 4 choices, and then you get 1 extra, which should be something like biology or biochemistry or biomedical sciences. And those applications are going to be due earlier than the normal equal consideration deadline. So same goes for Oxford or Cambridge. And you can also only pick either Oxford or Cambridge to apply to. The application is a simple cost. It's £27.50 or about $35 to apply to all 5 choices. And the equal consideration deadline is the 31st of January next year. If you miss that deadline by any chance, most universities will still accept applications for most courses. But some of your more prestigious, quote unquote, universities might be closed after that date if they don't have space available in the courses that they have. And regarding entry requirements, each university will clearly state entry requirements for each program on their websites. And also there should be a webpage for USA students on every university's website as well. So that will delineate exactly what you need to get in. The UK has a wide variety of entry requirements. So some schools are test optional, some are test flexible, some are test mandatory. Oxford and Cambridge, I can tell you right now, are test mandatory. And there's a very wide array. There's really something for everyone. If you're not taking any standardized tests, there will be several options for you, but I would say that the majority of schools in the UK will require some form of standardized tests to apply. You'll also need a letter of recommendation, and sometimes supplemental materials will be required as well. So things like a portfolio or audition if you're looking to go into visual or performing arts. Many programs require interviews. So at Goldsmiths, we do interview for most programs, for instance. And the personal statement is kind of the biggest part of your application. Keep in mind that your personal statement's the only part of the application that you can control. Everything else is pretty much already done for you. Your grades are what they are. Your standardized test is usually already taken. So the part that you can control the most is your personal statement. And your personal statement should be very focused on why you're looking to study your chosen subject, why you might want to come to the UK to study it, what your career aspirations are, what you've done in high school that can support that subject. So if you're going into computer science, have you taken any computer science courses or coding classes outside of school? Have you designed an app? Have you done anything that would make the university see you as an attractive option as a student? And also keep in mind the personal statement's quite brief. It's about, I think, 4,000 characters or 47 lines, if I'm not mistaken. So just to recap, and before we go into questions, I'm just going to go over briefly this slide about the differences between US and UK admissions. I think a lot of students find this helpful to look at because a lot of you know what US schools look for, but you might not understand fully what UK schools look for in an application. So for US schools, you often talk about or hear about, I should say, admissions officers saying they're looking to shape a class or look for like culture fits or suitability to the institution. That's not really the case in the UK. If you qualify for the program and your grades are good and you have all the requirements, you have a very good shot at getting into the university by and large. And it's much more about the suitability to the program than it is for the institution as a whole. A lot of our universities are decentralized for admission, so often your professors are going to be looking at your application, not an admissions office. It does depend on the university, but that's something to keep in mind as well. In the UK, it's very straightforward. All of our entry requirements are very transparent. We have one essay, one letter of reference, and very easy deadlines. There's one deadline for equal consideration, and then one deadline for Oxbridge and medicine vet science. For the US, it's quite complicated. There's early action, early decision, regular decision. Who knows what those even mean? There's things like demonstrated interest, multiple recommendation letters, multiple essays. It can be quite extensive to apply to a US school. And also they take into account things like personal qualities, athletic ability, extracurricular activities, which UK schools generally don't look at unless they pertain to your course. So it's great that you've played, lacrosse or swimming for a really long time. That shows great commitment, but UK schools don't really care about that unless you're going into maybe like sports science or something. So yeah, if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to pop those in the chat. And I'll just drop some additional resources for you. It's really good idea to look at, the Study UK website. There's also the UK CISA, which is the United Kingdom Council on International Student Affairs. A lot of your questions can probably be answered on that website, and I'll forward this to your college counselor so you can have these links. But it's a great website for resources on things like the visa process, for how to apply to the UK, how to research courses, how to move to the UK. It's a really kind of extensive website for international students. You can also see where in the UK, you can use federal loans. The vast majority of schools in the UK do accept US federal loans. And then if you want to connect with people like us, we have an association in the US of international regional representatives. These are all of the international universities that have people based in the United States. And a lot of my UK colleagues also come and visit in the fall and spring to do recruitment events and admissions, and they often pass through DC. And a lot of the universities also do virtual and in-person events that you can join as well. So with that, I'll leave our contact information up, and again, you'll have access to this presentation later on. But just in case you want to take a photo of that to reach out to us, can leave this up for a second. And I suppose we'll open the floor to any questions if you have any. And I want to also thank my colleagues for their great job presenting as well.
Yes, and I'm going to start. This is Kate. I am curious how you feel about AP credits versus IB diploma or just IB credits, because I have a lot of students who ask that question. Do you have a preference?
I can speak for Goldsmiths. So obviously IB is a really amazing curriculum that prepares you really well for UK university. Maybe that's not obvious, but it's a really good curriculum and it really prepares you well for UK university. So UK universities generally will happily and eagerly accept IB diplomas. But that being said, it doesn't disadvantage you not to have one. And most universities will consider AP and IB equally, just because the US doesn't have an equivalent of A levels, really. So the AP is as close as it gets. And so AP is just as worthwhile as IB in the eyes of, I'd say, the vast majority of UK universities.
Thank you. Peter, you're muted if you're speaking.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, essentially we're just looking for the equivalency, right, between A level and other curriculums. So just as Will said, we see AP and IB in a similar light. Speaking for Glasgow, I will say that it will be important for students to check what the admissions requirements are for the degree they're considering, because those do vary. So for example, if you're looking at English literature, it might be that our requirement is a 33 out of 42 on the IB. And then for APs, there isn't as much variation, but there is when it comes to humanities or arts degrees versus science degrees. So this is all something to look into a little bit more closely. Is do you think you can qualify for the degree you're interested in? And then if not, then what are some other options out there? Because if you, like Will was saying before, if you look at UCAS, universities are pretty good at including their entry requirements for different degrees there, but also on their website, they should include those as well. And then of course, if you have any questions, you should always reach out to your local rep as well.
Thank you. How do UK schools handle students with disabilities? Because, in the United States, they're very, very well set up for that. I suppose it depends on what the disability is, but in general, let's say a student's in a wheelchair or they have, a special health condition, etc. Can you address that, please?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to hopefully make suggestions to this in terms of the mechanisms of support that institutions have in the UK. It's very much about disclosing as much information to institutions in advance, if that's a consideration that needs to be taken for the well-being of the student. It's just to ensure that the university, there's an open dialogue with the university to make sure that they have everything in place to make sure that student is supported and can be supported. So whatever need is there, that the university can make sure that it will recognise that need and it can reflect on that need and make assessments and ensure that student gets the opportunity to provide dialogue to understand if we have everything in place to support the student when they're here. It's just about disclosing that information in advance and having that conversation to make sure that we have everything in place.
Yes, you can put your you can declare a disability on the UCAS application, and that would be the best way to kind of alert a university prior to your arrival. And I can only speak for Goldsmiths, but I think it works quite similar at most universities. We typically will reach out to all students who have declared a disability over the summer to schedule an appointment with our disability service. And then we can do things like set up reasonable adjustments, set up technology for you for students with dyslexia or things like that. Regarding like ADA compliance, it's not ADA in the UK, but similarly, most universities will be fully like ADA compliant for students in like wheelchairs as well.
Thank you. I just totally lost can you please also, you didn't talk about conditional acceptances, did you? Can you address that as well, what that is for students?
Yeah, oh, there we go. Yeah, so conditional acceptances, this means that we want a student to attend our university should they receive a conditional offer, but they will need to meet the conditions laid out in that offer. And so, in the case of the IB, we'd have to wait until a student submits their final exam results to then determine if they've met the offer requirements so that we can give them an unconditional offer. So the UK process can be a little bit more long-winded, and that can be quite an adjustment for some Americans, I think. Because if you are IB, then you really don't have your full offer, unconditional offer, until say July, when you receive your exam results. And the same can go for, you know, AP students as well. But a conditional offer is a good thing because it means that we see you as a strong student. We see you as being suitable for our institution. We just need to dot a few more I's, cross a few more T's, and receive those, you know, your final transcript, which needs to show that you finished your final academic year in high school strongly, and also your final exam results as well to meet your offer.
Thank you. Will?
I just want to mention it, like, isn't dissimilar from a US university. Technically, a US university offer is also conditional. If you don't graduate, you won't be going to university. If you fail 3 of your courses, you won't be going to university most likely. So it's not, don't worry too much about the nomenclature, because a similar system exists in the US as well. It's just that in the UK, we actually have a naming system behind it and a more robust system. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. All right, we have another question in here that says, can you talk more about choosing to either double major or do the joint honors degree?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we don't have the option in the UK to minor like you would in the United States. When you apply for a degree program and enroll in a program, sometimes, you know, you're applying to what is equivalent to a double major in the US. So for example, social and economic history, that's a degree, and that would be considered a joint honors degree, joint major, essentially a double major, because you would be taking classes in both subjects, economics and social history, in equal parts. It's then at the end of your degree where you determine which subject you want to write your dissertation on, focus your dissertation on, which is this big final essay that every student has to write. So yeah, we don't have the minor option. It's either single, you know, you're focused on one degree path, which could be, say, just economics, or you could tag along another subject area if they complement each other usually, and that could be something like economics and social history, just to give you an example. But so that's makes things a little bit different here in the UK. We don't have the major and minor option.
And to be clear, you wouldn't really be able to, you know, do a joint honors program in something like music and biology. That would never be an option. It would always be something similar, like Peter mentioned. So history and politics, or sociology, anthropology, or art and art history, something like that. In England, Wales, Northern Ireland, you might find something similar to a major minor scheme. They're called with degrees. So history with politics, which would be a history major, but then you have some politics courses, or economics with law. So again, they're going to be similar, but that would be kind of a major minor scheme. And again, all these are kind of built into the university. So you'd be applying to all of these joint honors and with degrees directly. So every university will list all their programs, and you can see what joint honors and with degree programs that they have.
I should also mention that it is, sorry. I just wanted to mention that it is possible to, say, enter in Scotland as a single honors student. So say I entered the University of Glasgow as a politics student, but I wanted to add French or German or even economics as to my degree. I could do that, but I'd have to take classes, first year or second year classes, in that subject that I'd like to add to my degree. So I could end up starting off as a politics student, graduating as a politics with French, or politics and French degree. So there is that option. You don't have to necessarily apply to, you know, initially apply for a joint honors degree to be a joint honors student. You could actually apply as a single honors student and graduate as a joint honors student.
As you know, in the United States, you can take gap years and defer a year before starting at the university. Is that allowed in the UK?
It will depend on the university and the program, but generally, yes. Gap years are quite common in the UK. Generally, I would say much more common than in the US. So I'd say the vast majority of schools would allow that. Goldsmiths does allow that, for instance.
For Glasgow, there are certain subjects that don't allow students to defer. So for example, law, they don't allow students to defer a year. And also some professional degrees like veterinary science and medicine, you would have to reapply again if you decided you didn't want to enroll in the coming year. So that's something to also keep in mind. And usually universities are very good at listing whether or not deferment is allowed on their website for certain degree programs. But usually the most competitive ones, they don't always allow, at least at Glasgow, they don't always allow students to defer.
Okay, can anyone comment on how well a foreign degree prepares Americans for returning to work in the US or US law schools?
Yeah. So I would say, it obviously depends on the subject, but for law school in particular, it's going to be a very similar education that you would find in the US. If you're taking a degree like politics, philosophy, economics, or an economics with law degree or something, or politics with law even, it should prepare you very well for law school. It's also, you're getting 3 years of very specialized education in your field. So if you are looking to stay in your field, you're going to be much better prepared than your US counterparts generally in this chosen subject. I did notice a question in the chat before that kind of asked about if it is a specialized degree, what sort of courses are you taking? And the answer to that would be that there are no general education or core curriculum courses. There are only core curriculum courses in your major. So you should be very, very well prepared for your future and for either attending law or medical school back in the US if you're studying, something similar to law or something like biology or biomedical science in the UK.
Yeah, and in Scotland, there are a few options as well. So you'll see that there's common law and Scots law. Common law typically is more similar to the law you find in the US. So, US law is really based on, in part, by law in the US. It comes from law or stems from law in the UK. So, when you are preparing for an LSAT exam, you will have in the US to apply for law school, say after your undergraduate degree in the UK. There are some adjustments you'd have to make. You have to study a little bit up on US law, but it is pretty transferable. And, having 3 years of law, even 4 years of law, just really prepares you quite well, because in the US, right, if you're a pre-law student, you're really not getting that sort of breadth and depth within law before you apply for a JD program in the same way. So it's, as Will was saying, it's beneficial for students to, American students who want to eventually return to the US to study law in the UK.
Thank you. Okay, so this is back to the working part. For student work part-time, is that 20 hours during the term total or per week?
That's per week, fortunately.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah,
That's what
20 hours per week. You can work during term time, and then outside of term time, it's up to 40 hours per week. So if students wanted to stay in the UK during the holidays, including summer holiday, they could work up to 40 hours per week. There are normally a lot of jobs students can find on the university campus, whether that's working at a cafe, working in the library. Internships are also paid, or at least more commonly paid in the UK than in the US as well. So this is I think a great option if students want to save a little bit, look for ways to fund their program. There are going to be a lot of options for work, and the career service at a number of universities also can help students find jobs as well, give them advice on how to apply for jobs in the UK, how to interview for a job in the UK, how to prepare, a CV, etc. So there is definitely a lot of support there as well.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions?
There was a question in the chat about the SAT that I'm not sure if we addressed. So I'll just briefly say that UK schools generally, it does depend on the university. So some universities will only look at AP and IB and do not care about ACT or SAT. Imperial College London, off the top of my head, is one of those. But I would say the vast majority will look at SAT or ACT scores also. Some of them might require them as well as AP exams. Some might look at them on lieu of AP exams. It really is dependent on the university, so it's hard to say definitively.
Right, and Glasgow is test flexible, we say. So if you do not have APs, if you do not have IB scores, or say, for example, you're an IB student, you're taking IB courses, but you're not a full IB student. So in that case, what we'll do is we'll look at your GPA, at the strength of your GPA, the rigor of your course load, which as an IB student, is a good indicator. And then we'd also require an SAT or ACT score. So that's, we do offer some flexibility there. You don't have to be taking exams for APs or IB, but it's important that if you are taking IB courses, and that's showing on your transcript that you send in through UCAS or through Common App with Glasgow, it'll be important that you say in your application that your plan is not to take the exams, or you're an IB certificate student, not a full IB student. And for APs, you can also notify us that you'd like to apply as a test flexible student, meaning that you don't necessarily want to be considered for your AP scores. You'd like to be considered for your SAT, SAT or ACT, and a GPA.
Okay, what is this? Can you comment whether scores earned in 9th grade will count towards the A-level requirement? This student thinks her AP score of 5 doesn't count if she took it in the 9th grade.
It counts.
Okay, yeah, I
still
figured.
an AP score.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah. Okay.
And a good score
definitely
too.
counts.
5 is great.
Yeah,
we like 5s.
That definitely counts. All right. Are there any other questions here? All right. Wait a minute. Another one just came in. Oh, this is a big relief. Okay. Yes, that is a big relief. So I just want to mention, I did put this in the chat, but BCC does have a partnership with UCAS. So we do have our students that are applying to the UK do it through UCAS. Not all schools in Montgomery County work with UCAS. So I encourage you, if you are interested in applying in the UK, please check with your college and career advisor. Again, they're located in your counseling department. Oh, there is another question. Just to see whether or not they're participating with UCAS. And if not, you'll have to talk to them about how to apply. All right. Can you comment similarly on how well foreign degree prepare Americans for returning to US, but in engineering and sciences?
Yeah, I mean, they prepare you well, right? not only are you graduating with a degree in engineering or one within the sciences, but you have this international experience, which I think looks very, very good on your CV. You know, if you are an engineer, engineering is a diverse field. People from all over the world work in that field. So I think that companies, institutions, they like to see that you have experience interacting with people from all over the world. In terms of the degree being transferable, we're fully accredited institutions. You can take our degrees anywhere. So definitely very, very recognized and transferable. You know, all of our institutions have alumni all over the world, including in the US. We have our own robust alumni networks. So that sort of speaks to the transferability of our degrees.
Okay, and sorry, go ahead, Will.
Oh no, I was gonna just the question that Lizzie had that was before the AP score question. Can you clarify what you mean by the program course material? Do you mean like, are there exams during your classes?
Yeah, I meant like standard UK education systems, like the equivalent of US high school in like UK. I know that they have a lot of like testing, like GCSE, that kind of thing. So I'm wondering for universities, like how much is testing factored into it? Is it like after like every term you always have finals, or is it like constant, consistent like testing times?
Yeah, so I would say like there's a lot less busy work, so to speak, at UK University. So like maybe not so much like daily assignments, but you'll typically have like maybe 1 or 2 term papers per course, and maybe like 1 or 2 exams. It really depends on the course, obviously, but I don't know, Peter maybe can speak better to this as well, because he did do his degree in the UK.
Well, no, that you're spot on there, Will. I mean, it's totally not as much busy work. And I would say that it all depends on the professor teaching the course, because they will make the course more about testing at the end of the term, and others will assign more papers. So I would say now the trend is having a good mix, and not, the exams are not counting for the bulk of your grade now. I'd say that there's much more course material being required of students. They're also right there. You'll be taking semester-long courses. You'll be taking year-long courses. So that can make a little bit of a difference. But overall, I would say it's mixed. Our universities also have professors from all over the world, and that can sometimes determine what a course syllabus looks like. I would say American professors, which there are many in the UK, they tend to have a more American approach to how they teach a course. And so they might be assigning more papers. So it just sort of depends overall, but I'd say it's far less common now for, your final grade to, an exam to count for about 75 to 90% of your final grade. That's far less likely. It's much more of a mix of the essays, labs, participation also in tutorials, presentations, even in class presentations. That's counting more towards your grade and through your assessment, or towards your assessment rather, than an exam, which for me was, a welcome thing for sure. But that said, for exams, I think this is an important point to make. You will have plenty of time to study, not just during term time, but schools will give you a week. Universities give you a week to study prior to taking your exams, where there aren't any courses or anything. It's just the exam period. And that really helps you prepare. You can also go to study sessions with fellow students, and also professors sometimes host study sessions to well prepare you for those exams. So there's definitely ample amount of support available to students.
Thank
you.
you. All right, I'm going to ask one last question. What is the application process for students who are UK citizens applying? If they're applying from the States? Is it different?
No, it's the exact same process. You apply through UCAS like normal. You'll just state on the UCAS application that you are a UK citizen. So when the time comes to go through the visa process, like a normal international student would, not normal, but you know what I mean, then you obviously wouldn't be going through that visa process since you have a UK passport. The biggest thing is that you wouldn't pay any visa fees, you wouldn't need a student visa, and you wouldn't pay into the health insurance surcharge because you can access the NHS as a UK citizen. So you would just arrive in the UK, register with the NHS office, like a normal UK citizen would, and kind of go about your day. It's pretty easy when you're a UK citizen. But we consider all applications equally, so it doesn't advantage you to be a UK citizen over, a non-UK citizen.
All right.
And then when it's in terms of visa, right? Tuition fee status. That's what I meant. In terms of tuition fee status, if you've lived in the US for the past 3 years, or outside of the UK in general for the past 3 years, then you won't be granted local or domestic fee status in the UK. So you would be paying international fees for the duration of your degree.
Thank you. All right, well, I know Ian was having a little trouble with the internet connection. So technology is great when it works, but not so great when it doesn't. So anyway, thank you all so much for being here today. As I mentioned at the beginning, this has been recorded and it will be shared with your college and career advisors. And if you are visiting our schools in the fall, we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks
you.
for all your questions. Really appreciate it. And nice meeting you.
Bye, have a good day.
Nice to meet you too.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
All right, I have to stop recording.